In the spring of 1952, under the harsh light of the Jordanian desert sun, a team of archaeologists carefully stepped into a narrow cave carved into the cliffs near Qumran. The site had already gained fame for a discovery made just a few years earlier: ancient scrolls sealed in clay jars, preserved for nearly 2,000 years. But this cave held something different. Hidden among fragments of parchment and broken pottery was a strange, corroded object. Not a scroll in the usual sense, but a rolled sheet of metal, green with age. Too brittle to unroll, it had to be cut into strips, revealing lines of Hebrew etched directly into the metal, like a message meant to last forever. But this was no biblical text. No hymns, no laws, no prophecies. Instead, it listed places, caves, cisterns, tombs, and treasures, immense treasures. Dozens of locations, they each said to contain gold, silver, sacred vessels, and ritual objects, were buried in secret, waiting to be found. Some called it a temple inventory, others a treasure map, and still others a riddle. Scholars were stunned. Who wrote this? When? And more importantly, was any of it real? And so is the mystery it carries. This is the story of the Copper Scroll, one of the strangest texts ever discovered near the Dead Sea. And if you're here for real history, no myths, no exaggerations, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for deep dives into the world's most remarkable manuscripts, books, and artifacts. The story begins at an archaeological dig on the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea in early 1952. Unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls, which Bedouin shepherds stumbled upon in the 1940s, this scroll was carefully excavated by archaeologists. On March 14, 1952, archaeologist and his team, working jointly for the American Schools of Oriental Research, the Palestine Archaeological Museum, and the École Biblique, were systematically exploring Cave 3 at Khirbet Qumran. Amid the cave's dust and debris in a back chamber, they found two tightly rolled sheets of oxidized metal stacked one atop the other. These corroded rolls did not at first glance reveal their importance. They were greenish and brittle from centuries of oxidation, giving little hint of the text within. But the context left no doubt that this find was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls cache. Cave 3 also held fragments of parchment and papyrus manuscripts, broken storage jars and lids, and an oil lamp, all characteristic of the scroll deposits. Archaeologists quickly realized they had something extraordinary. This was the only scroll found in Qumran made of metal. The team carefully noted it as the third quarter of 15, the 15th manuscript from Cave 3, which would soon become known simply as the Copper Scroll. Its isolation at the back of the cave, away from other scrolls, suggested it might have been hidden with special intent. News of the discovery spread, exciting both scholars and treasure hunters. While most of the other Dead Sea Scrolls contained religious texts, the Copper Scroll was distinctly different. One member of the team thought he recognized the Hebrew words for gold and silver on the corroded copper. The Copper Scroll would soon become one of the biggest mysteries of the Qumran caves. What exactly had been found? The artifact consisted of two rolls of copper. Centuries of burial in the arid cave had turned the copper surfaces into a brittle oxide layer, making the rolls extremely fragile. Unlike ink on parchment, the text on the Copper Scroll had been chiseled or incised into the metal. This method and medium set it apart from every other Dead Sea Scroll document. The Hebrew script visible on the corroded copper was puzzling. The artifact has changed homes over time, notably remaining in Jordanian custody even after the 1967 political shifts. Today, the Copper Scroll is proudly displayed at the Jordan Museum in Amman in a climate-controlled case that shows the 23 slice strips laid out for public view. This unique scroll, the only metal document from Qumran, stands as a tangible, copper-gleaming link to a dramatic moment in history. The story of the Copper Scroll spans over 7 decades, marked by scientific breakthroughs, bold expeditions, and ongoing scholarly debate. Let's take a brief look at its remarkable journey through history. On March 14, 1952, archaeologist Henri de Contenson and his team, working in Cave 3 at Qumran, uncovered 2 rolled sheets of oxidized copper. Designated as Manuscript 3Q15, the Copper Scroll stood apart for its metallic medium, practical tone, and cryptic content. Due to its extreme brittleness, the scroll was sent in 1955 to the University of Manchester's College of Technology, where metallurgist H. Wright Baker carried out a detailed examination of the scrolls. In the late 1950 and 1960, initial translations, most notably by John Marco Allegro, proposed that the scroll was a genuine treasure inventory, perhaps linked to the Second Temple of Jerusalem. Between the 1960 and 1980, inspired by the scroll's contents, Allegro and other enthusiasts launched numerous expeditions to search for the listed hoards. Caves and ruins around Jericho, the Valley of Acre and Qumran were excavated, but none yielded any of the described treasures. Despite exhaustive efforts, no item has ever been definitively located. In the 1990 and early 2000s, as imaging and analytical techniques improved, scholars revisited the text with fresh tools and perspectives. From the 2010 to the present, the Copper Scroll has become a focus of interdisciplinary study. Next, we'll explore the contents of the Copper Scroll in detail and discover what makes them so unique. When the Copper Scroll was finally unrolled in Manchester in the mid-1950s, its content astonished everyone involved. Unlike the religious and legal manuscripts that comprised most of the Dead Sea Scrolls discoveries, this text was neither devotional nor interpretive. Instead, it unfolded as a methodical inventory, written with the detached tone of a bureaucrat recording supplies. As scholars transcribed the lines, they realized they were reading what appeared to be a detailed record of immense caches of precious metals and ritual objects hidden across the Judean wilderness. The scroll did not open with a blessing or a curse, nor did it explain why the treasures had been concealed. It simply presented a list, one that has confounded historians ever since. From the very first entry, it was clear that this document was not metaphorical poetry, but a compilation of instructions meant to be acted upon. The text's plainness was almost unsettling. It did not moralize or instruct, it was simply recorded. The more the entries were examined, the clearer it became that this was unlike anything else from the Qumran caves, an object that sat somewhere between archival record and clandestine directive. The Copper Scroll contains 64 sequential entries, each describing a separate deposit of wealth. However, some scholars have argued that several lines are continuations of the same cache, which could reduce the total number to around 61 or 62. Each of these entries follows a consistent formula, demonstrating a structured approach to documenting the treasure. First comes a description of the location, often referring to ruins, caves, cisterns, or burial chambers. This is followed by highly specific instructions, often detailing the exact number of cubits or steps to dig from a landmark, and concluding with an inventory of what was hidden there. One of the most striking aspects of the list is the extraordinary quantities of precious metal it records. In many entries, the amounts are measured in talents, a Near Eastern unit of weight roughly equivalent to 30 to 35 kilograms. For example, one cache is said to contain 900 talents of silver, an amount exceeding 27 metric tons by modern estimates. One entry mentions 65 gold bars buried in a cave near a cistern, while several others describe vessels and incense containers, suggesting both ritual and monetary value. The scroll does not limit itself to precious metals alone. Other entries describe sacred items, including priestly garments wrapped in linen, incense vessels, and, in at least 3 instances, written documents or scrolls buried with the treasure. This suggests that the valuables were not merely monetary reserves, but were connected to religious practice, perhaps representing the wealth of the temple or a community determined to preserve its holiest possessions. The descriptions of the hiding places themselves are equally detailed and at times cryptic. Many locations are identified by reference to architectural features that no longer exist, or whose names are now unknown. Phrases such as "in the cistern which is under the portico," "in the tunnel of the water conduit north of Kolit," and "in the second enclosure of the burial chamber," paint a vivid picture of a landscape that only insiders could have recognized. Some entries are astonishingly precise, specifying the depth to dig, 40 cubits under the steps, or at the base of the pillar 4 cubits down. Such specificity has led many to argue that this could not have been an imaginary list. It was meant to guide someone who already understood the landmarks. Scholars have carefully tabulated the entries and attempted to calculate their combined value. While modern equivalents are approximate, even conservative estimates place the hoard's worth in the billions of dollars in today's terms. That sum is so large that some have wondered whether it represents not the treasure of any single sect or community, but possibly the hidden reserves of the Jerusalem temple itself, concealed during the First Jewish-Roman War to prevent it from falling into Roman hands. Despite the clarity of the instructions, no confirmed caches corresponding to these entries have ever been located. Some researchers believe they may have been recovered and dispersed long ago. Others think the treasures remain undiscovered beneath layers of rubble and centuries of change. This gap between what is described and what is known has left the Copper Scroll as both a historical document and a tantalizing mystery. If the subject matter of the copper scroll is extraordinary, its language and style are equally unique, something we'll explore later in the video. The scroll adopts a tone that resembles an accountant's ledger or a government inventory. Each entry begins with a terse locational phrase such as "in the ruin that is in the valley of Achor" or "in the cistern which is in the courtyard of the peristyle," immediately followed by quantitative measures and a list of items. This style is so consistent and so prosaic that it has led many experts to believe it was the work of someone with administrative responsibilities rather than a scribe of religious texts. Beyond the vocabulary itself, the structure of the text also sets it apart. Unlike the scrolls that record scriptural commentary or sectarian rules, the copper scroll contains no theological justifications. There are no invocations of God's protection, no curses against intruders, and no moralizing statements about why these treasures were hidden. The omission of any preamble or concluding formula, so common in other ancient inventories, has puzzled scholars. Was this a deliberate choice to protect the information from outsiders, or does it suggest the scroll was part of a larger archive, perhaps with a companion document that provided the broader context? Another notable feature is the occasional appearance of Greek letters at the end of certain entries, likely abbreviations or numerals used for cross-referencing totals. These hints of Hellenistic influence further distinguish the scroll linguistically from the purely Hebrew religious texts stored in the other caves. From a paleographic perspective, the script style points to the late Herodian or early Roman period, most likely between the mid-1st century CE and the early 2nd century CE. The engraving itself varies in quality. Some letters are deeply incised and neatly formed, others are shallow, as if etched in haste. The entire text was laid out in columns, implying that the scribe treated the copper sheet like parchment, formatted in an orderly vertical sequence, column by column. All of these features of Mishnaic Hebrew, the unadorned inventory style, the occasional Greek characters, and the practical tones suggest that whoever composed the copper scroll was working in a unique milieu. Whether this was the world of temple treasurers, Essene archivists, or wartime custodians remains open to debate. But, in every respect, this text differs markedly from the other Dead Sea Scrolls, which has only deepened the mystery around it. Having looked at what it contains, let's now explore the four main theories that seek to explain its origins and purpose. The first and most widely accepted theory suggests that the scroll is, in essence, a treasure map. According to this view, Jewish authorities, perhaps temple priests or members of the Essene community, secreted vast wealth in the Judean wilderness during the Roman invasion of 70 CE, carefully recording each stash for future recovery. The scroll's meticulous details, including exact measurements, landmarks, and enumerated weights, read like an authentic administrative document rather than a legend. The use of copper, a costly, durable medium, suggests that its creators intended this record to survive for generations. Many Dead Sea Scrolls scholars, including P. Kyle McCarter and Alison Schofield, argue that these treasures were real, likely drawn from the Jerusalem temple's accumulated tithes and offerings. Chemical and paleographic analyses have dated the scroll to the late Second Temple period, aligning with the era of Jerusalem's fall. Proponents note that no ancient sources dismiss the scroll as fantasy, and its dry, almost bookkeeping tone seems ill-suited to the realm of myth. Some researchers have even speculated that the scribe's awkward script and spelling errors were the result of a semi-literate copyist transcribing a dictated text, an effort to keep the information secure. But this interpretation faces serious challenges. For decades, explorers have followed the scroll's instructions without success. In 1962, John Allegro led the first major expedition to locate the hoards, returning empty-handed. The quantities described, hundreds of tons of precious metal, seem almost implausible, leading some to suspect exaggeration. Critics also question how the Essenes, known for their asceticism and criticism of temple corruption, could have been entrusted with such enormous wealth. And while Josephus does record Roman efforts to hunt down hidden treasures, the complete absence of archaeological confirmation casts doubt on the scroll's literal promises. The second theory proposes a symbolic or ritual interpretation. This theory suggests that the copper scroll was never intended as a practical guide to buried riches. Instead, it may be a symbolic composition, perhaps a ritual catalogue of blessings, a vision of spiritual inheritance, or a coded message of messianic hope. Notably, scholars such as Jean-Baptiste Humbert have called it an imaginary temple inventory, inspired by Jewish traditions that speak of hidden sacred treasures awaiting a future age. Later texts, like the Treatise of the Vessels, similarly list treasures hidden by prophets, clearly as theological statements rather than factual records. Jesper Hogenhaven has proposed that the Copper Scroll was meant to lead readers on a mental pilgrimage through an idealized landscape, evoking memories of Israel's past glories and the promise of restoration. From this perspective, the decision to engrave the list on copper could itself have been ritualistic, symbolizing the permanence of God's providence. Supporters point to the scroll's unique style, so different from the community's legal and liturgical writings, as evidence that it served a didactic or esoteric purpose. Many of the place names are obscure or unknown, suggesting they were never meant to be found on the ground. And the text's reference to a missing duplicate document could be a literary device, implying that the real key to the treasure lies elsewhere, perhaps in oral tradition or revelation. Yet this theory too has weaknesses. The Copper Scroll does not contain any explicit allegorical language. There are no moral lessons, no divine instructions, and no prophetic declarations. Unlike other symbolic texts, it reads as a plain list of physical items and precise measurements. Critics also question why anyone would undertake the laborious process of chiseling such a detailed inventory into copper if it were purely metaphorical. If it was intended as a communal myth, why has no other text from Qumran referred to it or explained its meaning? While elegant, the symbolic interpretation must explain why the document looks so insistently like a literal record. Third, the hoax or pious fraud hypothesis. This perspective suggests that the Copper Scroll was created as a deliberate decoy, either to mislead Roman looters or to boost morale among a defeated population. According to this view, the treasure was never real. Instead, the list was fabricated to occupy potential enemies or to inspire hope among the faithful. When the scroll was first examined in the 1950s, its many spelling errors and irregular script led some to suspect it was a forgery or a prank. Though specialists have since confirmed its authenticity as a first-century artifact, the notion that its content was intentionally bogus has lingered. Proponents argue that if Jewish defenders faced certain defeat, producing a false record could have bought time or protected actual assets. Advocates of this theory note that the scale of the wealth described is staggering, perhaps deliberately so, and that some entries mention items unlikely to be hidden as loot, such as priestly vestments. This blend of plausible detail and exaggeration could have been designed to create a persuasive illusion. Historical sources do confirm that Roman forces were actively searching for hidden treasures, so the incentive for misinformation was strong. But the hoax theory raises its puzzles. If the scroll was meant to deceive the Romans, why was it buried in a cave among religious manuscripts where no one was likely to find it? A decoy only works if it falls into enemy hands. If it was intended to reassure a Jewish audience, why is there no record that it circulated or was discussed? And if the scroll were a product of fraud, why invest so much time and copper in something never intended to be read? Critics point out that most of its quirks can be more simply explained by a rushed or poorly trained scribe. Beyond speculation and legend, the Copper Scroll has been the subject of decades of meticulous scientific study. Researchers have applied techniques from metallurgy to linguistics, from paleography to satellite imaging, all in the hope of clarifying its origins and purpose. Now, while the scroll has yielded important insights into ancient materials and scribal practices, it has also posed formidable challenges. In many respects, the Copper Scroll remains an enigma even under the scrutiny of modern science. The first breakthrough in understanding the Copper Scroll came in the late 1950s, when metallurgists in Manchester undertook a detailed material analysis. The scroll was found to consist of an unusual hammered copper alloy, approximately 99% pure copper, mixed with traces of tin, produced in sheets only about 1 millimeter thick. This composition made it extremely brittle after centuries of oxidation. Because the scroll could not be unrolled conventionally without disintegrating, scholars decided to saw it into 23 strips using a high-precision lathe. This delicate operation revealed the text column by column. Subsequent paleographic studies, the analysis of ancient handwriting, were critical for dating the inscription. Experts such as Frank Moore-Cross compared the letter forms with known examples from the late Herodian period. The script style shares affinities with inscriptions dated to the 1st century CE, including ossuary inscriptions and some late Second Temple Hebrew documents. These features have led most scholars to place the Copper Scroll's composition somewhere between 25 CE and 75 CE, though a few have argued for an early 2nd century date. Linguistic analysis has provided additional evidence. The Hebrew used in the scroll is colloquial and administrative rather than literary, a style often called early Mishnaic Hebrew. Certain rare spellings and vocabulary items, some found nowhere else, have complicated attempts to cross-reference the text with other Qumran writings. Reading the scroll has posed unique challenges. Over time, the copper's surface developed deep corrosion pits that obscured the lettering. Even after the mechanical separation of the strips, many sections remained illegible to the naked eye. In the 1990s, researchers from the West Semitic Research Project at the University of Southern California pioneered high-resolution photographic imaging to enhance the inscriptions, and more recently digital techniques like 3D scanning have made previously hidden lines clearer. These technological efforts have confirmed the text's authenticity as an ancient inscription rather than a modern forgery, but they have not resolved the deeper question of whether the scroll describes literal caches or symbolic ones. If deciphering the script has been difficult, interpreting the geographic references has proven even more complex. The copper scroll frequently mentions locations that are either entirely obscure or only partially understood today. Phrases such as the cistern in the Valley of the Shadow or the pillar in the Second Court lack clear correlates in modern topography. Since the 1960s, scholars and explorers have made repeated efforts to match these descriptions to real places in Judea. Early expeditions focused on the cliffs near Qumran, where the scroll itself was found. Later attention turned to Wadi Kelt, a rugged gorge running between Jerusalem and Jericho, which features numerous caves, rock-cut channels and ancient ruins that could fit the text's language. Some have argued that several entries seem to refer to locations within or near Jerusalem, possibly the Temple Mount area. However, modern excavation in these zones is fraught with religious and political sensitivities, making comprehensive archaeological verification nearly impossible. A few researchers have attempted to apply Geographic Information Systems, GIS, to correlate ancient roads, watercourses, and settlement patterns with the scroll's landmarks. While these methods have generated plausible hypotheses, such as identifying specific caves or channels, none have yielded definitive proof of a cache. This persistent uncertainty fuels the ongoing debate. If the text is literal, why have no deposits been recovered? And if it is not, why does it employ such detailed spatial language? Despite decades of research, scholars have reached only partial consensus on the copper scroll. Most agree on a few foundational points. First, the scroll is genuine, a first-century document as confirmed by paleography, metallurgy, and chemical testing. Second, its language and format are unlike any other Dead Sea Scrolls, suggesting it was produced in a unique context, possibly by a group concerned with the preservation of valuable assets rather than theological instruction. Beyond these points, much remains speculative. The identification of the locations described in the text is still unresolved. No archaeological campaign has definitively recovered any of the treasures listed. Theories about the scroll's origin, whether it came from temple priests, Essene custodians, or another Jewish faction, remain hotly contested. This uncertainty has led many experts to call for more interdisciplinary collaboration. Historians, linguists, archaeologists, and materials scientists each hold part of the puzzle. But no single discipline can yet explain the scroll's full meaning. Proposals for targeted excavations, advanced imaging, and comparative study with other ancient inventories are ongoing. And so the copper scroll endures as a challenge to scholarship itself, a document that defies simple explanation and demands that we question what we think we know about the final days of Jewish autonomy and the preservation of cultural memory. In the Copper Scroll, we have a remarkable convergence of history, legend, and scholarly detective work. Let's break it down. What do we actually know about the Copper Scroll? This unique copper document, created in a time of crisis nearly 2,000 years ago, continues to captivate our modern imagination with its promise of hidden wealth and its glimpse into the tumultuous world of the Second Temple period. We followed its journey from an ancient cave shelf in Qumran to a museum display in Amman, tracing the chronological flow from its mysterious origins through its 1952 discovery and painstaking opening to decades of study and debate right up to 2025. Along the way, we delved into the scroll's contents, a detailed catalogue of 64 secret caches painted in sparse words that nonetheless evoke vivid images of ruins, tunnels, and glittering hoards of gold and silver. We saw how scholars have pieced together those clues, sometimes aligning them with known places in the Holy Land, other times scratching their heads at vanished names. The theories and debates surrounding the Copper Scroll reveal as much about us as they do about the ancient authors. The scroll has been variously attributed to humble ascetic scribes, to temple priests hiding sacred wealth, to national rebels fighting empire, and even to legendary prophets safeguarding the Ark. Each theory, whether grounded in academic evidence or inspired by faith and adventure, speaks to a deep human fascination with lost treasures and the hope of recovering something precious from the past. We have weighed arguments that the Copper Scrolls treasure was real and retrieved, real but already plundered, or perhaps never real at all. While consensus leans toward a genuine treasure inventory, most likely tied to the Jerusalem temple and its final days, the lack of physical finds means the debate isn't fully settled. And so, the Copper Scroll straddles that boundary between documentary reality and enduring mystery. From a scholarly perspective, one outcome is clear. The Copper Scroll has enriched our knowledge of ancient culture regardless of treasure. It's a testament to the ingenuity of its makers that they chose copper to outlast the ages, and indeed it has. As a text, it preserved rare Hebrew words and a format of record-keeping that has broadened our understanding of the period's language and administrative practices. As an artifact, it challenged researchers to innovate new methods to read and preserve it, leading to advances in conservation and imaging. In these respects, the Copper Scroll is a treasure in itself for historians and linguists, offering a tangible link to the hopes and fears of a people under threat, doing what they could to secure their heritage. Yet it is the unanswered questions that keep the Copper Scroll in the spotlight. Will any of the caches it lists ever be found by archaeologists using the scroll as a guide? The odds might seem long, but as one archaeologist noted, history has a way of making skeptics eat crow when new discoveries emerge. Even in recent times, previously lost artifacts like the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves, or cities like Ubar in the Arabian desert, have been found with the help of ancient texts and modern technology. So the possibility, however remote, that one day an intrepid and careful dig could uncover, say, a jar of silver coins under an old stepped cistern matching the Copper Scroll's description is enough to keep the flame of curiosity alive. In conclusion, the Copper Scroll remains an enticing enigma, a first-century time capsule that speaks of hidden riches and daring plans, yet greets us with silence about their final fate. Its narrative from antiquity to now is a chronological tapestry. The last echoes of a temple's glory, the quiet of a cave refuge, the excitement of modern discovery, and the meticulous pursuit of knowledge. We leave the Copper Scroll with a deeper appreciation of the world that produced it, a world of faith, conflict, and meticulous record-keeping, and with respect for the scholars and explorers who have dedicated themselves to understanding it. Whether or not the Copper Scroll's gold and silver are ever unearthed, the pursuit of its story is its own reward, yielding insights more precious than treasure. As it stands today in a museum case, the Copper Scroll invites each generation to ponder the question that has echoed since 1952. What lies hidden, awaiting those who have eyes to see and the wisdom to seek? The adventure it promises is both intellectual and, possibly, literal, a true archaeological mystery at the intersection of history and legend, still unfolding in our time. If you enjoyed this journey into the forgotten corners of history, give this video a like to show your support. Subscribe to Whispering Owl and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new mystery. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you know someone who loves ancient secrets and untold stories, share this video with them too. And don't forget to check out the video description for some fascinating reads about the Copper Scroll. As always, stay safe, stay curious.